Welcome to San Miguel TV. This is a special San Miguel TV live, man. It's Sunday, November 23rd, 2025. And I have a special guest. I'm going to let him do most of the talking because he got a story to tell. I know that you've been telling your story. Um, I've seen you on different channels since you escaped and deprogrammed from the ICGJC. I'm glad to have you here tonight, man, because it's been a while since we've gotten to chop it up the way we've been doing these last few weeks and the way that we're gonna do tonight. So I'm gonna just let you introduce yourself just briefly, and then we'll take it from there, brother, man. Let these people know who you are, man. Welcome.
Yeah, my name is Willie Valvey Jr. I was known in the ICGJC as former officer of 100 Napash. I'm from Louisiana. Um, and I came into the ICGJC in 2003.
All right. You came in 2003. How did you hear about the ICGJC?
Well, I want to backtrack just a little bit because it was actually in 2002 that ran across this Puerto Rican guy from New York City. I ran across him on the official message board for the rapper Nas at the time, and
Okay.
he had joined ICUPK back in I think 1992, and I met up with him on Nas's message board, and then we started talking on AOL Instant Messenger.
It had to be the ISUPK in 1992. ISUPK.
Mhm.
Yeah, my bad.
Right. So yeah, we started talking on AOL Instant Messenger, and he was the guy that taught me the Lashawan Kodash, the 12 tribes breakdown. Uh, and I had been talking with him for like several months.
Right.
And in the process of talking to him and getting taught by him, I actually ran across the old website that ICGJC used to have um, before the Holy Conception Unit, which was ICUPK.com.
Mm,
Uh,
right.
yeah.
I had to go back later on because I came into ICGJC in 2004,
Mhm.
and I definitely met you maybe in 2004 over the phone.
Mhm.
So we have some history ourselves. You used to, I think the reason why we got in contact like that, we used to always be in contact on the phone. First of all, I was just one of those people that you could always, hit up and I'll be available. I'll be at the class and I'll have my phone on and ready to put near the speaker. I used to put my phone, you used to call me and I used to put my phone, or sometimes it'll be the church phone if we had it connected, near the speaker so you could hear the teacher in Orlando teach. And I think the reason why that is because Orlando was the closest church to where you was at, I believe. Um, and this was you're from what part of Louisiana? You from
I'm
Shreveport
from
area,
No, I'm from Natchitoches. I was actually born in Shreveport, but I grew up in Natchitoches.
right? For
Mhm.
people that some people might know Shreveport, and that's a city that I definitely heard of. But I mean, when you hear about Louisiana, you hear about New Orleans, of course, and you hear about Baton Rouge. Um, were there any other brothers in the state of Louisiana in the ICGJC?
Yes, it's one. He's an officer of 100. That's it.
But when did he come in?
Around 2011, I think.
So that was definitely after you and after I met you because you were the only one in the whole state of Louisiana for all those years. Then
Yeah.
I wanted to point that out. We could touch on that a little more because it doesn't make any sense that you have a state like Louisiana, with a high black population, especially in cities like Baton Rouge and New Orleans, and even in Shreveport, you're gonna have higher than the national average black people in that city. And that's for those that don't know. If you look at the map, that's more northwest, um, of where the main cities, like the real populated areas that people know about, at least Baton Rouge and New Orleans. That's more towards the east, towards the south. I think Baton Rouge is a little more north. But you know, I always wondered, and I think about it now. These people like to brag about the numbers. Why do you think that you were the only one in this place? In this whole state, when the ICGJC proclaims to be such a powerful force, they're supposed to be driving in members from all over. So like, did that ever? Did you ever think about that as like a red flag, maybe, or a a contradiction? To what they're saying, and you're looking around, and it's like, yo, I'm the only one in the whole state. Like what? Looking back at it right now, like what do you think about that? Like, what is the reason why the ICGJC is not growing in these different locations?
If I had to sum it up, man, I mean, it's not like they didn't know that me and this other brother were out here, you know. So if I had to sum it up, man, it's just we were just out here stranded for years,
Mm,
um, with no growth at all. And um,
right.
at the time that I was, for all those years, I was so entrenched in the doctrine that it never really came to mind that, you know, I knew I was the only person out here for years,
Yeah.
but looking at it as a red flag wasn't coming to mind because of how fully entrenched I was mentally into this doctrine, but I was just holding out for years, just waiting and waiting and waiting, for something to get set up out here, and it just didn't materialize.
Mm. Real quick, I want to address people in the comment section because you might know some of these people, Willie. We got Saint Ivan, the first comment, man. Salute to you, brother. Nothing but love for Saint Ivan. Um, you remember this brother Saint Ivan for sure, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We've been chopping it up. Yeah.
That's good. Good.
Mhm.
We got Maya Stevenson in the house. A regular visitor of the channel, always commenting and showing love. I appreciate you. Reno James is in the house. Philly's in the house for sure. That's my brother. I love Reno James, man. Always in the house. Um, we got Koa Chris. I don't know. Welcome. Unk is cooked and chopped. I don't know. X Flying Pie is welcome either way. Mayan Stevenson is asking, what rank were you in the ICGJC, Willie?
Officer of 100.
Okay, so that's the highest rank you ever attained.
Yeah.
So you were in there for a good 22 years because you just recently left.
hmm
And you came in 03, so that's almost 22 years, if not 22. I think the reason why, of course, you're going to be able to elaborate better, but I'm looking at it. The reason why is because you just recently got this rank, and for years they never had like any way of like, first of all, you're supposed to have more members in these locations, so that way you can run a Hebrew Academy. So the ICGJC is supposed to have all these resources available,
hmm
as a nation is supposed to have. I mean, you're getting all this money. This is another reason. This You're an example, and everything that didn't happen in Louisiana is an example of the thievery that was going on, and the underhanded damn funds being taken without nobody knowing, because the history of this cult that we were both a part of later
hmm
on. I mean, we were living the history. We are the history of this cult. That's why we're here
hmm
talking. Who else is better to speak on this but people like me and yourself, and
hmm
other people that's here in the comment section.
hmm
We're going to be honest about this. Is going to be completely unbiased and honest. There's going to be some hard feelings sometimes because we were led to believe things that never came to pass. I mean, if this brother was there in '03, and then all that they had in 22 years is one other addition to the membership in Louisiana, that's a failure, and um it's a failed prophecy. It's a what you call damn, I'm blanking on this. A unconfirmed expectancy or
Mhm.
disconfirmed expectancy. You expected something to happen because they're constantly telling you, and when you read the scriptures, with the narrative that they push and the time warp that they put on you, because they always use a scripture that is completely out of context and it applies to a whole different time. They always try to push that on us, and like, if this is the truth, you're supposed to be the church with the spirit of God. How come you only got one member in the whole state of Louisiana? And why are you not sending out men to go out there and recruit more people, so that way you can save, like, you can do what you claiming you're supposed to be doing?
Mhm.
This is part of the reason why I'm constantly speaking out against this, because there's people that don't want to hear anything. There's even members that have left the ICGJC and they don't want to hear anything else about this. It's like they don't even want to have a conversation. I think that's partly because they're confused still, or they're still very hurt. But the
Mhm.
reason that we're able to do this is because we've got the courage, and we're past that pain. We're past the deception, and we're trying to move forward. And that's why we're doing this right now, to show y'all that we can do that. You can move forward. It's not difficult at all, even if you've been there for 20 or 30 years. You know, but yeah, there's just a lot of things that was promised to us. They know. I mean, as far as I know, I always remembered you, as always, as far as back as I can remember, from the day that I met you. You've always been a person of your word, and you were always available when somebody needed to speak to you. You were always ready to learn. So they could have easily sent some type of help out there with you as a foundation, and really started something,
Mhm.
and they dropped the ball. Whether it's the truth or it's not the truth, put that to the side and just look at what didn't happen. And that right there is going to tell you, that this place is a failure. And now it looks like they're trying to move around more. But so I guess from here, let me see if we got more questions. So you were officer of 100. When did you get the rank of officer of 100?
In 2021, after I completed the virtual New Hebrew Academy program.
So, did the virtual Hebrew Academy program begin because of the pandemic?
Yeah.
Okay. You see, it didn't even happen. They didn't even like think to do that on their own. They had to, be forced to do this because of, current situations that was going on, that was holding people back from even congregating and worshiping, whatever they want to worship. So because of that, then they started going to other, uh, measures of having people go to the Hebrew Academy. They could have done that way back then if that's the case, you know,
Yeah.
and it's just crazy, man. But there's so many different angles we could talk about the ICGJC. I kind of want to just read more comments, man. Um, the super unit. They should have had a super unit come out to Louisiana.
I got
Um,
something to say about that since you brought up super units.
yeah, definitely.
I was supposed to have actually gotten to be a part of that. Um, because I got a call from a chief priest from Florida, well, actually a bishop from Florida I talked to first, and he was telling me, if I wanted to be a part of the super units that was supposed to be coming out here to do unit work out here, and and then he referred me to a chief priest in Florida that didn't even tell me about it. He just did it, without me even knowing. And then he called me and told me about it, and
Right.
And then I talked to this chief priest, and he tells me, we've been doing unit work in your area, but we didn't tell you. They came out here last year and did unit work in New Orleans and didn't tell me a damn thing about it.
How
They
how
ex-
far how far are you from New Orleans driving?
um about a 4 to 5 hour drive.
That's not bad. We used to do that to go to Miami.
Yeah,
Yeah, my bad. Go ahead. Yep.
but yeah, they
So
came out
so
here.
they came out to New Orleans.
Uh-huh.
Who came out to New Orleans?
Oh, they're super units. They came out here, I think, several times last year, and the only way that I knew about it,
Any particular members you could think of that came that you know?
yeah, they were definitely apostles and chief priests that I recognize.
Yeah.
But they came out here, I think, several times last year, and the only way that I knew about it, I had to find out on their social media accounts where they were posting pictures of the different places they were going. They didn't even tell me they were out here.
They probably did a little quick stop, and a picture is 1,000 words, and a picture is a photo. A photo is basically frozen in time, so it seems like it's a lot longer than it really is, but it just takes a minute to take a picture and bounce, and they can make it seem like they really put their feet down. They were ten toes down in New Orleans.
Hmm.
No, they weren't, man. If you were really putting in the work, you would have you know you would have a congregation out there, just like IUIC has, or even some of these other churches, some of these other Hebrew Israelites that been established in Louisiana for a long ass time. Like all of that is a good indication right there of the failures, the false promises. This is something that we expected and we looked forward to, and we even told ourselves that you know what, it's still going to happen. We started lying to ourselves in a way, and kind of forcing ourselves, our minds to kind of bend to their ways, and kind of, like, just keep pushing, keep pushing the date back. Some people call moving the goalposts.
Hmm.
That might be a whole different thing. But yeah, it is. Well, it is moving the goalposts. If you say something's going to happen at a certain time, and then you start to say, well, this is supposed to happen at this time. Now you start to change the original statement or the original proclamation. When a man of God speaks, or when God speaks through a man, it's not supposed to be taken lightly. This is supposed to be something that is going to definitely happen. Like, there's no turning that around at all. So, there's so many failures with this place. We could talk about the Hebrew Academy. When you joined the Hebrew Academy in 2001, how did this thing work virtually? Like, how were you getting the tests? How were they getting the answers? And obviously, did they give you like a certain time to complete the test? You know, uh, Give me more information on that. And I think some people want to know more about the super units.
All right. So basically, the way that it was structured, it was all done through conference calls on a Sunday. You had the Bible breakdown class. That was a conference call. The Hebrew class. Excuse me, Lashawan Kodash class. The Bible breakdown class, law class, English class. All of those were conference calls that were done on a Sunday. Um, and the way that we did everything, online, as far as taking the tests, and they were multiple choice questions on that New Hebrew Academy website that they had.
Mm. So they had a Hebrew Academy website.
Yeah, New Hebrew Academy website.
Yeah, right, the new Hebrew Academy.
Hmm.
Okay. Um, what kind of questions did they ask you? Like in the Bible, like let's go to the history class. Because I used to teach a history class. I remember questions like, how old was Abraham when Isaac was born? What kind of questions did they ask? Do you remember any of these things? I kind of want to, like, see what was so new, about the Hebrew Academy that changed from the last Hebrew Academy. Well, you remember any of these questions, or for any maybe for the Bible breakdown?
Well, yeah, for example, one of the things that they basically with the Bible breakdown classes, they were going through what they call the milk breakdowns. Like for example, Christ
Right.
only died for Israel. You
Yeah.
would get
Yeah.
questions based off of that. You know, um,
Right.
um, and basically, a lot of the stuff that was in the Bible breakdowns class that I remember offhand were those what they call the milk breakdowns.
So they taught you that Jesus Christ is Yahweh.
Yeah.
That's one of them. They
Hmm.
taught you the Gentiles not going to be saved. That
Mm.
Israel
Hmm.
only. They taught the color of Christ, where they go to Revelation chapter 1 verse 13, and they go to Daniel chapter 10 and Daniel chapter 7.
Right.
You know, yeah, that's like things that are easily like I've had videos where, listen, when you actually know the Bible and you go into these ancient books, where did King James translate these books, these scriptures from, and got the King James version that we swear by in these script in the cult pretty much, and we don't like to touch on the other, like, interpretations. That's something that, when I started actually, you know, learning more about the different interpretations, and
Hmm.
like where the new like when you go into John chapter 3 verse 16, and you look into the Greek uh
Hmm.
word for world,
Yeah.
you know,
Cosmon.
yeah, you can see that it's cosmos. You can see that it's actually, now we're talking about real scholarship, other
Hmm.
than you just, oh, you see the word world, which world? And they want to ask you these questions because they already have an answer, and they're trying to set you up. Which world? Then they go to Isaiah chapter 45 verse 17, and when you read the word world, when it says,
Hmm.
it's actually means everlasting,
Hmm.
you know and
Yeah.
it's repetitive. Actually, the King James version was repetitive when it said an everlasting world, because the word world is already talking about everlasting.
Yeah.
So
That that.
the way that the King James translated it, they just added another word for
Hmm.
world, which could just mean an age,
Right.
and all of that. So, or it's something that's forever, that's everlasting, you know.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah. In the Hebrew, it's Ad Olme Ad, which means until the ages of the ages.
there you go. You see, we're doing real scholarship. When I escaped this shit, when I escaped the ICGJC, I started actually doing uh, research into how to speak these different languages and how to interpret these words. What does the
Hmm.
word buy? How do you say buy, to purchase in Hebrew when you read Deuteronomy 28:68?
Hmm.
It's actually kwana.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
kwana, which
Yeah.
means to acquire,
Yeah.
to possess,
Hmm.
or to own, or
Hmm.
to buy, to
Right.
purchase. And you could go to Genesis chapter 19 and verse 7, when it calls, I believe it's 19 and verse 7. I might 9 and 7 it might be. But
Hmm.
the scripture that calls God the creator
Hmm.
of heaven and earth, the word creator in Hebrew is interpreted as possessor.
Hmm.
He's the possessor of heaven and earth. And the word possessed used in Genesis is also kona.
Hmm.
So that shows you right there that the word that's being used there, it means to acquire, to get, to purchase. Has nothing to do with being saved or being helped in any way, from, like, that's not what it's talking about.
Yeah.
I love getting into these conversations because it shows you the reason why we left this. Like, people are gonna
Right.
say that you're just angry, Willie. They're gonna
Hmm.
say, "Yo, he's just mad because he was trying to pay this money. They're gonna say all types of stuff because you probably had counsels with these people, right?
Not necessarily counsels, but talks over the phone. It was a lot of verbal abuse, and I knew that I took, for over a year, and I knew that trying to reason with them and tell them, um, the way that you said this to me offended me. I knew I wouldn't have a voice, and they wouldn't try to hear it. You
And
know,
you're one of the most humble, easygoing, gentle people that I've ever met in my life. That I never would think that you would be a problematic brother, in any way. You were always there to, I even met you, I believe we met in Edison, New Jersey, maybe in the 2008 Passover or something like
That
that.
sounds right. That sounds about right. Yeah,
Maybe 2007, 2008. And it was a brother that was a chief priest or an apostle. He was Puerto Rican or Dominican or something. I don't know if you remember him. He had a nose ring. He was bald headed, and he had a big mole on his face. I forget his name. And he came up to me and he was like, "Yo, there's a brother that wants to meet you. He said that he knows you from somewhere." And I was like, "Who are you talking about?" I was like, "I don't know. Who are you talking about?" We have to Passover, so I'm like, "It could be anybody." I've spoken to brothers in Canada. I've spoken to brothers, in North Carolina before, brothers in Baltimore and Philly. By then I knew people from around, from all over. But then when he told me who it was, he was like, "Oh, he came all the way from Louisiana." I was like, "Oh, I know exactly who it is." And then I
yeah.
went to go meet you. That had to be around 2008 Passover, I'm guessing. You know, uh,
So
yeah.
I just want to answer on the um. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name right.
Shikorina.
Shikarina 12. No, I never talked to Yashal. I never talked to him.
Okay. I didn't see that question, but yeah, if you see anything, you could address it, man. This is easy going. I saw
Yeah.
you on Faithful to God's live stream. You live stream. I didn't hear about it. I didn't hear about it till the day of, I think, and I didn't get to watch it live, but I caught some of it later. That's one dude that he's been faithful and real diligent in tearing down Hebrew Israelite doctrines, and he's putting some of these Hebrew Israelites to shame. If you want to debate a Christian and you call yourself a Hebrew Israelite, talk to Faithful to God, because he's one of the people that reached out to me when I first started making videos. You could catch me on Faithful to God's channel back in 2018.
Right.
I think I went on there twice. Yeah, good
Mhm.
job, man. That was great because I like that dude. I really click with him a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Bro really knows his stuff. I give it to
Oh
him.
yeah, he's no joke. He's no joke. Then you got Jim Green. We gotta shout out Jim Green, man. I don't know if he's on right now. He's out in Cali, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. California.
Okay, I think he's in Bakersfield, something like that.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, he had me on his channel before too. I'm very friendly with these Christian brothers because they're actually good people when you actually speak to these people like on a real level and you get to really understand and know who they are. These are good people that, you know, they just trying to serve God just like we were doing, and they have a understanding that we were completely confused. So
Yeah.
coming out of these different doctrines, it could go you could go either way. I've met people that still believe, they still go by the Hebrew Lashon Kadash name, you know, and
Yeah. I've
they
seen that
don't.
myself.
Yeah, they just don't believe in Tazadakia being the comforter, but they still believe in the 12 tribes chart and all of that. So I don't know, man. I mean, I'm not really here to debate these people, and that's not what we're doing this for, man. We're just gonna have a good conversation, and the fact
Mhm.
that we could do this is just a good foundation to build, and just have more conversations in the future, and we can both learn from each other, because I definitely learned from some of the things that you mentioned, like we were just like when we talking about their misinterpretation of the word world. and
Hmm.
how they use that to do what's called double meaning
Right.
and double speak. You know, double think is another. That's another thing, but it's similar to what double speak is.
Hmm.
You know, it's double think is when you hold contrary beliefs at the same time, two contrary beliefs at the same time, and that's definitely something they do up in there. But
Hmm.
double speak is when you say that the word Egypt can mean the literal land of Egypt, or it can mean bondage, and you can just play with that word at any time, like you do with the word world, like they do with the word by in Deuteronomy 28:68. They
Hmm.
already know. Like we went over, I've been over all these like different issues about the ICGJC, and they never address that. They want to address everything else. So if anything comes out about this brother, what I'll tell you what they're going to try to do. They're going to try to poison the well and try to destroy him as a credible source. And that's one thing that we're not going to do here, man. And we're not going to allow that. So we're going to get ahead of the game. I don't know if they're going to mention you, because when it comes to like people that really know what they're talking about, they try to avoid them at all costs. You know, they don't address certain things. So, um, but what's one of the like the main doctrines that pulled you in to the ICUPK or ICGJC? Was it called the ICUPK when you came in
It
03?
was already ICGJC when I came across the Holy Conception Unit.
But it was the Israelite Church of God, and
AND, yeah.
right. Oh yeah, we didn't forget about that little hiccup. But yeah, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Then later it became the Israelite Church of God in
Yeah,
Jesus
just
Christ.
a few, yeah, a few years later, yeah.
Yeah, not even just maybe a year later, I think it was, man.
Hmm.
But yeah, '03.
Hmm.
About what month? Do you remember about what time of the year?
May.
Okay. Yeah, tell me more about that.
All right.
What was
So,
it like? What was some of the doctrines that really pulled you in?
well, it was the Deuteronomy 28:68 breakdown that got me. You know, I had
Right.
never heard anything like that before. The
Mm,
way that they used into Egypt with ships to meet America, and then tying it in with being sold as bond men and bond women, meaning male and female slaves. I had never heard anything like that before, so that's what did it.
mm.
Um,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, man. That was something that definitely was powerful. And it made me think that these people know something
Hmm.
that nobody else knows. You know, there's something about that secret knowledge, the appeal to secret knowledge. You know, Tazadaki spoke about that one time when he said that Chinese people always want to talk about they have some secret medicine and stuff, you know, some
Hmm.
secret Chinese remedies. He knew about all this stuff that we're
Hmm.
now starting to realize like this cat was just learning basic cult leader, you know, 101 type stuff, you know.
Right.
Make people think that you have a secret knowledge or some secret information that nobody else has access to, pretty much.
Hmm.
But somehow I have access to that because God is dealing with me. You know, it
Hmm.
takes a lot of balls, man. It takes a lot of balls and just a complete disregard for the your fellow man, and
Hmm.
your God too. Like if you really believe in God, why would you even put yourself in a position to where you want to be the mouthpiece of God and you know that you're not,
Hmm.
man. So now when you started when you started pretty much deprogramming from the ICGJC, what were some of the doctrines that helped you see that they were wrong?
Okay.
Was it also Deuteronomy 28:68, or was it something else?
Yeah, I did look into that one. It's funny you mentioned that because I actually I got my Hebrew right here, my Tanakh right here, and my Greek New Testament. I want to debunk that live on air if you want. If
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
All right. All right. So what I'm gonna do is first thing I'm gonna do is read Deuteronomy 28:68. This is one of the breakdowns that I debunked, and
Okay.
I'm gonna read it in the real Hebrew, not that Lashwan with our stuff.
And make sure y'all give this video a thumbs up, and we'll
All right.
continue on. Definitely.
Um, okay.
When you read Deuteronomy 28 and 16,
Mhm.
um, it's talking about, and on down, it talks about curses that's going to come on to the nation of Israel if they don't follow the laws of God. And they use this as a way to identify who the Hebrew Israelites are today. But how come they never use the blessings as a way to identify who the Hebrew Israelites are? I always ask that now because we never did that. Because isn't that another way to identify who the Hebrew Israelites are too?
Mhm.
You know, and verse 42, what black man's crops was eaten by locusts, and what black man's produce in the United States was eaten by locusts, or however you want to interpret that word in Deuteronomy 28:42. But we could get there. Yeah, man. Go ahead. Do what you
All right. This is Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 68 in Hebrew.
yeah.
Weheshiyivcha Adonai Mitzrayim ba'anayot. And the Lord shall bring you back to Egypt in ships.
Hmm.
Berek asher amalti lekal lo tosip o li riota. By the way which I speak unto you, you will not see it anymore again. Now here's the part that a lot of people don't really consider. Where hit makartim shamla oyicha. This right here is translated as "and ye shall be sold unto your enemies" in the KJV, but in literally in the Hebrew, what it means is you will and there you will sell yourselves, or and there you will offer yourselves for sale. And the reason for that is because in the Hebrew, um, the part that says "and you will offer yourselves for sale" is pronounced "wahit makartim" in the Hebrew. There's
It's a
a
it's a
hate,
reflect it's a reflexive way of you saying you're talking about yourself, you know?
yeah, yeah. It's because of the hithpael verb stem, the which would be ha and tha if you're speaking Lashon Kodash, but in real Hebrew it's hey and tau in front of the word makar. And what that does is it makes the verb reflexive, meaning the action that's being done is what somebody is doing to themselves. So literally it means "and you will offer yourselves for sale," or "you will sell yourselves."
Boom. And then if we could take it back a little bit where it says and there,
Hmm.
it's actually talking about a place. It's referring back to the land of Egypt. And if you read the book of Exodus, chapter 17, verse 6,
Hmm.
can you read that in
Let's see.
English?
Okay,
And
hold on.
you can read it in Hebrew if you want to,
Okay.
because we're talking about which way, what the
Hmm.
way thereof I spake unto thee, thou shalt see it no more again. And there, so if it's telling you there, it's referring back to a place, not a condition of bondage, because they want to, you see, that's double speak right there. We know the word Egypt, every land, the meaning of the word of Brazil or of every land, there's going to be a meaning to that. But if we're talking about a land, if I'm saying that I was born in America, they're gonna say, "Oh, you were born inside Amerigo Vespucci." It's like that's where their minds go, bro. It's like, no, we know America's a land. We know Egypt is a land. Every word has etymology. Every word has a root thing, a root word that it goes back to. But
Mhm.
the word I think Tyree, I think means like by the river or something like that. You know, so they'll use the word Tyree, and then just change that at any time, to mean something else. I can do that with the word Assyria. I forget what the word Assyria means, but um, you know, we could say, oh, here's a scripture that says that the nation of Israel went to the land of Assyria. And now we're going to change the meaning of the word Assyria to mean whatever the root word is, going to the etymology. That's called double speak. And that's the way you trick people. This is common cult tactics, but yeah, Exodus chapter 17 and verse 6 pretty much it connects with Deuteronomy 28:68, and nobody ever does this. Oh yeah, go ahead. Want to read that?
Okay. Behold, I will stand before thee. Behold, I will stand before thee there upon the rock in Horeb, and thou shalt
Exodus 17 and 6.
yeah.
What's the one that says that thou shalt not multiply horses?
Oh, okay, that's Deuteronomy.
Deuteronomy? Oh,
Mhm.
17:6.
Yeah, yeah.
My bad. Because that's the one that connects with Deuteronomy 20:68. My bad. I'm
Right.
rusty,
All right.
um, is it Deuteronomy 17 and 6? Okay, yeah, my bad.
No, no, hold on. Hold on a second.
That's fine. I got Deuteronomy 17 and 6 right here. Hold on.
I'm looking it up.
Napash, are you still giving COVID as excuse for holding conference calls? Well, he's no longer in the ICGJC. We're gonna get to that. And when you left,
Who asked that?
the same one that asked question before. Damn, I forget the scripture. If you Google "Thou shalt not multiply horses,"
Deuter-
maybe
I
I'm
got it. Deuteronomy 17 and 16.
16. Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, because I was looking at it right now.
But he
Yeah,
shall not multiply horses to himself, nor cause the people to return to Egypt, to the end that he should multiply horses. For as much as the Lord hath said unto you, ye shall henceforth return no more that way.
you're right. That's exactly what Deuteronomy 28:68 is talking about. The land of Egypt.
Mhm.
They're gonna take the word Egypt there and say that it means bondage. When you look up the word Mizraim, it doesn't even mean bondage. It's a double. It's like it means two straits. It means straits or like a tough path. But it means like a double because Egypt, it's always known for being a north and south, or the lower and upper Egypt is always known for that.
Mhm.
So people always talk about Egypt that way, as if it's like a double, So it's Deuteronomy 28:68 definitely was one of those scriptures that it took me a while because I was going through other scriptures when I deprogrammed, like things that were more exclusive to me being Hispanic, So I started going to Second Ezra chapter 13, and I started going into all the different um, so-called evidences of Native Americans or Hispanics, being lost tribes of Israel, because you could find certain things out there, in the world, and people write all types of stuff. There were people coming out here thinking that the Native Americans were somehow connected to the 10 tribes of Israel. That was a
Mhm.
legitimate belief.
Mhm.
This was the first guess. This was their uneducated guess. This was their inexperienced, assumption, before we started getting archaeology, anthropology, DNA evidence, excavations of bones being found, hunting tools that were found, animals that crossed over, that they were hunting for thousands of years. They've been hunting woolly mammoths, and they actually made woolly mammoths go extinct. Not to mention that woolly mammoths, had all that hair because of the ice age, and once the ice age started going away, now they were able to travel. Like, that explains why Native Americans and the land of America started getting populated. It was because times were changing and the ice caps were melting, and now
Mhm.
land that wasn't exposed is now being exposed, you know, um, and vice versa. And they were traveling down the ocean coast, um, all the way down to the Americas, that wasn't called America at the time, of course. But before 720 BC, you already had people here in the Americas. And that debunks their whole idea that the 10 tribes were the first people to ever set foot in the land or to ever dwell in this land, while at the same time, they try to tell you that King Solomon sent fleets out here and had people come out here, so then they were already people out here, supposedly before 720 BC, if you want to go into that. When you look at that scripture that talks about every 3 years, King Solomon was sending fleets from Tarshish, that was a trade that was going on through the Mediterranean. And the Hebrews always traded through the Mediterranean. That was a great way to trade, actually. It was better than going anywhere else down the Red Sea. You have so many more countries, and you got the northern part of Africa and the southern part of Europe, and the Mediterranean covers all the way out to Spain. So who were they trading with if there was nobody in that land out there in America? Because the scriptures tell you that Solomon was trading all types of stuff, and the ships are being sent out and coming back with other things. So who were they trading with if there was nobody in the land of America?
Mhm.
Like, those were things that, like, I connected with, that I realized, as far as me being a Simeonite from,
Mhm.
you know it just didn't, I didn't see the connection anymore.
Right.
But so there was a lot of, you know failed promises. There was a lot of red flags. I know you remember the year of dedication,
Mhm.
uh, the year of the Israelites in 2012,
Mhm.
and then the damn the doll, the Tazadakia doll, and the lawsuit that came out. That
Mhm.
big red flag for me. That was an obvious scam that he was trying to pull. Then you have the 2015 Blog Talk Radio 3 hour phone call where you could tell that he was feeling the heat. He knew something was going down. He was trying to get information from Tazak Taziyar about the FBI, because they were getting ready to raid him. And I found that shit out by 2015, through a brother named Yaquam in Naples, Florida. He told me straight up, there's, something's about to go down, and this dude is using the money through the church to try to make it seem like he has a successful business. And right away, that clicked with me. I'm like, this dude Jaquam is smart as hell, and I understood it right away. And I was like, man, we got, man, we got fooled, we got tricked. How can I move on from here? I got to tell everybody. I got to tell my cousin. And slowly but surely, I started telling people. I think I reached out to you. Definitely, you removed me as a friend, but I forgive you, brother, from
Yeah,
Facebook. Yeah,
yeah,
I hit
man. I
you up.
was,
I have to hit you up, man. But yeah, what you said?
yeah, man. I was still fully entrenched, man. I was brainwashed. I was gone, bro.
Yeah,
You know.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all, man. Trust me. If it wasn't for certain things that happened in my life, I probably would have been in there a little longer. I don't know. It's a roll of the dice. The way things work. I don't know. I just happen to just see things, and I was already out for so many years. I was getting really pissed off with people in there. I started seeing the changes of people like Ahmath and I'm a one. These personalities that like these crazy changes in people. And these sociopathic changes. It's like they were being like Tazadaki. You had like little mini, Tazadaki, like mini me, fucking Austin Powers. They were
Hmm.
like little mini Tazadakias, man. You know,
And
behaving like him and trying to be like him and trying to like use his fake authority on us. And we were just kind of just going with it. But I was getting pissed off. I was like, nah, man, you ain't gonna just whatever. That's a whole nother story. Because the reason they put me out is because I missed 4 Sabbaths in a row. These cats don't even keep the Feast of Tabernacle, which is a law that they're supposed to keep according to the Bible. They don't even make an attempt to keep the Feast of Tabernacles, but they want to get on everybody else because they might have a situation, that lasts more than a month, maybe a tough pregnancy that a wife might have. They don't care about that. They expect you to be there, even though Tazadakia was not keeping the Sabbath every Saturday. He would pull up during the business time with a do rag and a Lamborghini and pick up some money from the business that we just paid, and he'd bounce. And it's a Sabbath day. What? Why does it? How come he didn't keep the Sabbath? And we got to be there just sitting down and just taking all this crap. Like, come on, man. Enough is enough. There comes a time where people have to speak up. You could only fool the people for so long, and good people, we got to start stepping up. And sometimes we got to get a little aggressive and being the bad guys sometimes, man. And in their
mhm.
eyes, they're gonna look at you like you're the bad guy because you're speaking against them and you left. Because they want you to be quiet. They want you to be silent and be a little sheep and a follower. And there's people that weren't taking that, man. Like there's so much going on with people's lives. You're messing with people's lives, man, and people's families and people's beliefs. And you expect people not to be upset, and keep coming at you. We're not going to stop coming at the ICGJC. I'm not going to stop doing it. But yeah, man, I mean, I said all that. I said enough, man. If you want to add on to anything, it's just the reasons why you left, then came the raid, then the indictments came, then they pled guilty, then Tazadakia died. All that was going on while you were still in there.
Mhm.
Like, how were you feeling doing all of that stuff, man? That's had some type of impact. There's no way it just was like whatever. You just let that slide. I don't know.
Nah, man. But to be honest with you, around the time, like I said, 2016, I was still fully entrenched in the doctrine. I was believing that everything that was being said about him was fake news because that was the narrative being pushed. It wasn't an attack on, um, like he said, on that one clip. Uh, it's not he there where he was standing in front of the church that the church was being persecuted, you know
Right.
and I was believing this stuff, because any type of legal documents about him we were ordered not to even look at, so I didn't look at it. I didn't I was It wasn't even until recently that I even looked at that stuff. um
Wow.
yeah, it took me snapping and deconstructing to even venture out and to look at any of that stuff, any of the legal documents, the ex-member videos, but basically just to, you know the 2016, I
Right.
believed what was coming out, that it was about the church being persecuted and this was supposed to happen,
Right.
you know.
But there's a video where Tazadaki is talking about how there's nothing supposed to be holding us back, and that we're living in a time when this is not the time when the apostles was being killed, the apostles being persecuted. He said we're not living in that time. We're living in a different time when they have power with God. They're supposed to have power with God at least.
Mhm, mhm,
If they try, like the fact that the Injustice League effectively exposed Tazadakia right there was a sign that he's not the comforter. There's
mhm.
so many signs, man. That Hebrew Academy video that I did, shout out to Lahara Ash, man, from Orlando. If you remember, Lahara Ash, he used to
Yeah, I
perform.
remember him,
Yeah, man. You know, um,
you
he
know.
he's he left. He
Mhm,
escaped. He's still a faithful believer in God. He's still a Christian. He believes in Jesus Christ. Um, he was being deceived to think that these cats was gonna be on top of the world. Um, you know, that wasn't even the beginning. Like that's not even the tip of the iceberg. Because it ain't all about success and money. But that's what Tazadaki was pushing. Like it didn't have
mhm.
to be about that. But if you're gonna make the claim that Black Icon Entertainment is going to be the biggest entertainment group, in the world, then if we don't see that happening, we have to call that out. But Lahara Ash said a beautiful thing. He said that when you look at the story of the prodigal son, when somebody left this, you know, God, if you want to break it down, that way, if somebody leaves God, you're supposed to go get that brother. You're supposed to go sway that brother and go get him. And what these cats were doing was straight up like making fun of people and trying to make jokes and make everything about, some we're the demons and we're evil and just try to demonize people that had a problem and made legitimate, rebuttals and had legitimate concerns, like
Yes,
actual this ain't no, oh, I'm mad because somebody spoke to me the wrong way and I'm just mad. Like
right.
it's just serious
Yeah.
stuff, man.
Yeah, I wanted
You
to
know?
just take the quick moment to answer a question. I was asked when did I leave? Um
Yeah.
I just left ICGJC this month. I mean, it was like
Right.
Thursday, this coming Thursday will be 2 weeks since I told them via text. Um because after one of their 13 shield generals was relentlessly calling me and texting me, I had to, because I didn't show up to their ranking men's call on a Wednesday night um
Right.
conference call, ranking men's conference call.
Right.
Um I texted the guy back and I told him, uh, if this is somebody from my CGJC, I don't believe your doctrine no more. Okay. Hebrew Israelite doctrine is heresy. I don't believe it. I hold to Orthodox Christian beliefs now, Coptic Orthodox Christian beliefs. And I do not believe your doctrine and don't contact me anymore. Tell whoever you need to tell. Don't contact me anymore after this.
Right. What happened before that? Before it led to that? What was going on? Like you told me you had conversations with people that were trying to push you to go up to the Passover and to pay for these cheap ass Joanne fabric garments
Mhm.
that only cost like a buck 20 the most, buck 60. I'll give them a $200. And they were charging you something like $700 for a garment and your office of 100. Go into that a little bit because I mean we can't, we know about that. I could corroborate and confirm that you're not just telling that story, but I went through that too, man. Go ahead and get on that.
Yeah, well, the first instance of this was in um well, I'll take you back to March 2024, where an apostle had hit me up telling me that Passover was upon us and we need your garment, you know. And he told me our records show that you paid $50 for your passport ID. Originally that thing is $100, but it's just a laminated card with your picture and English name and Lashawan Kodash name and rank and what branch of the church you're from. And the thing got a barcode on it that ain't even scannable, but you paying $100 for it, you know. So he calls me on the phone and he he basically starts telling me, if I really wanted the garment, I could have done everything I could in order to pay for it. What did I do in order to pay for it? I told him I was trying to find work. Then he says, but you didn't set up a commitment with me to pay for the garment. If I ain't got no money to pay for the damn garment, how the hell I'm gonna set up a commitment with you to pay for it? Um, so he goes into this whole spiel about we serve a God that can do anything, and so now
If they serve a God that could do anything, why are they not keeping the Feast of Tabernacles? But
well, I mean, they then yeah, they're just keeping the remembrance of it. Obviously, they're not doing the boots because we're not in the land of Israel. So
it tells you that you're supposed to keep these commandments
hmm
wherever you go, wherever
hmm
you dwell. You're
hmm
supposed to keep all these commandments, and especially they doing the Passover.
hmm
I see the IUIC doing the Feast of Tabernacles, and if you don't believe me, just YouTube IUIC Feast of Tabernacles 2025, 2024. They did it 2023. I don't know how far they've been doing it. They're ziplining through the woods. You know, that's what they that's what they're doing during their Feast of Tabernacles, while the ICGJC is saying, "Oh, we can't do it because we're slavery." Well, then, if you're in slavery, then why are you putting people out for missing the Sabbath days when your own comforter is missing the Sabbath days because he's supposedly making business deals, and he's okay. That's okay for him to do on the Sabbath day because he's a comforter. He could do anything he wants because it's all of that, man. But
Well, continuing on though.
yeah,
So basically, he tells me we serve a God that can do anything, and this whole spiel.
hmm
And then he just flip flops the conversation into personal struggles that I had confessed 2 months prior and wanting to know if I was still doing it.
right.
So it's not about a garment no more. It's about these personal struggles, and I get thrown off guard. I wasn't expecting that. So I get yelled at and told to repent and fight my flesh and all this other kind of stuff. And the conversation ended, but the conversation was supposed to be about a $700 garment and why I hadn't paid for it. And that's just one instance.
Right.
So fast forward to earlier this year, my rank doesn't change, so I'm still an officer of 100. That means, they issue these garments every year, as you know.
Right.
Um, So because my rank didn't change and I'm still an officer of 100, that means that I owe for another $700 garment. So I got two of the same garments totaling $1,400 I got to pay for. That's the quote unquote national debt I owe all of a sudden.
Hmm.
And I hit this apostle up and I tell him, Shalom, sir, due to financial hardship, I can't pay for the passport ID and and the $700 garment, and he hits me back telling me, Shalom, sir, Khan. That's why we need a commitment.
Hmm.
So it's like, that clearly sounds like, if you're telling somebody you can't pay for something and they tell you you need to set up a commitment, that's clearly them saying, I
They,
don't
they,
care.
they're trying to test you
Uh-huh.
to see if you're gonna go that extra mile. That's what it is, because
Hmm.
there came a time where I came to these crossroads where I'm like, I have to pay rent or tithes. Rent or tithes. I'm gonna be homeless or I'm gonna be in the ICGJC's good grace.
Hmm.
And I started realizing that this had nothing to do with God. This was just some men that were gonna call me at 3 in the morning complaining that I still owe for my wife's picnic funds or something like that. Some
What?
picnic funds that no, sometimes it had nothing to do with tithes. This was before the time before I stopped paying tithes. It became a picnic fund thing, and my wife didn't want to go to the picnic some more. It'd be hot as hell, and she's pregnant. She don't want to be sitting out keeping a damn picnic where they can't even get a decent park with a gazebo and some shade. And the pregnant women were struggling, man. You could tell, like they didn't want to go there. And they would feed us a hot dog, a hamburger, and some chips or something. And then we get Dr. Thunder soda, and that was our $60 went towards that.
What the
Six
hell?
that now it's $100, I heard, right?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, it
I've
used to
never
be
been to those
60.
family picnics. I don't
Yeah. No, I used to have to set this whole thing. I used to have to find after a while, like I remember they had horrible choices for parks. And like you need to get some shady parks. Florida's hot as hell. And it was brutal, man. Even with the shady parks, we were catching hell, man. It was disgusting, but I didn't want to do it. But we pushed through, man. But it was hard for the kids. Kids were always complaining. They were hot, and there was limited food. It wasn't like it was just an abundance of food. We always had to wait, and then there'd be ranks that might not got food yet, that weren't even around, and we had to wait to feed them so the kids didn't get any more food until other people ate their first plate. It was so much like confusion, and everything was a struggle. It wasn't like pleasant at all. Nothing was planned. I mean, we try to plan it as best as we can, but we didn't have that much money to work with.
Mhm.
We had to find a park where we could rent it out for free. I mean, if we had money to work with where we could make a down payment and go to actual like a national park or something like that, because there's certain places you could go. But even then, man, it was like just it became just like a burden after a while, and my wife wouldn't show up for the picnics, and they would still charge her. Like it was crazy. Like I don't want to go. Why am I paying for this? They'd be
Wait, wait,
like,
wait, wait. Hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on.
yeah,
She, so she
yeah.
got
Even if
charged.
you didn't go, you would get charged.
What the? Oh, damn.
The picnics were mandatory. It was like a high holy day. They made it seem like it was a high holy day. So there came a time when people were just not paying for stuff, and they weren't keeping track. Then they started coming out with a national debt. That was probably like '07. Now they were keeping track of tithes that you didn't pay, but on top of that, they were throwing the picnic funds that you didn't pay for. And they would just add that on. And now when you got to a certain amount, they'll call you up and it'd be Tazapuan on the phone or Mafia Makapash will
Mm-hmm.
call you at two in
Mm-hmm.
the morning, and it'd be him and Tazapuan.
Two,
He
two in the
Mafia
morning.
Makapash will call you first, and then he'll be like, stand by, brother. We got Apostle. He's gonna talk to you about something. And then
2
this,
a.m. in the morning, bro. So you mean to tell me you got woken out of sleep?
mm-hmm.
What the? Oh, damn.
You got to awaken at 1 a.m. It'd be sometimes it'd be like they'll tell us after we do unit work. We get back sometimes 10:30 from unit work, and I'm ready to go home, and they're like, "Brother, you got to be on the phone for a council." with a bunch of other brothers that owe money, and it'd be like a group of people. There'd be Ride the Bar. Ride the Bar always owed money. You know what I'm talking about, Ride the Bar. Then you had, a bunch of other cats, bro. I mean, I don't want to just put people out like that, but I just
Is that
remember like
Alex?
it, huh?
Need to be free.
Need to be free actually was one of the brothers that always had a job and used to pay what he had to pay for. I give him that, man. He don't play no games, and they took advantage of him, and he's yeah, he was like just like me. He always kept a job. He always had a car, and they knew that, so they would call him every time, like, "Yo." But because he was closer to the church than I was, he'll definitely get called before me. You
Yeah,
know,
shout out to Need to Be Free. I've seen your videos too, bro.
yeah, man. Need to be free as a man. He's the man. Um, he's a smart ass dude. He helped me come out. He helped me like he hit me up with Lahara Ash one time, man. It was probably like 2012, something like that, 2011. And I remember I was like put out. I was down, bro. I was all effed up. I remember laying on the couch. I had just broke my damn fibula bone or something, because I got into it downtown Orlando, probably classic weekend or something. And these brothers hit me up and start telling me like, "Yo, what you think about this? What you think about that?" And I'm watching all these videos of Rebel Alliance, so I know what they're talking about. And I'm like, they're talking about the video where he's partying with the white girls, and it's like the Black Icon Entertainment Party in Miami. And they mentioned that, and I was like, yeah, I forgot what the hell I said, but I know I didn't come off disrespectful at all. Um, I know that there was like this hatred already towards him, and I was supposed to be talking to him, but I entertained him and Lahara Ash, and then we got off the phone, and I never reported it to anybody in the ICGJC because any other cat at that time, like Magun or Manatazak,
Mhm.
then bitch ass motherfuckers would have reported it to Yashar and said, "Yo, man, need to be free." They used to call him Darkness. They started making fun of how dark skinned he was.
What?
Yeah, they called him Darkness. I remember that. They were like, "Yo, Darkness called me, man," or Darkness is going off because they used to work with him. But he hit me up, and I never like went to them and said, "Yo, that dude hit me up." Bro, I kept it as a conversation between me and them. I always had that in the back of my mind, and then years later, it was just like a confirmation of what they were already telling me.
Mm.
Because like that dude, he was there before I came in Orlando. Need to be free. Shout out to you, man. I got much love, man. That dude is definitely somebody that exposed the ICGJC before I ever came out and said anything. I was
Mhm.
watching Need to Be Free's channel, man,
Mhm.
and Rebel Alliance. Shout out to Marksman.
Yeah, I've seen that stuff too. I mean, for years, and it's crazy, man. For years, I would avoid that stuff because, the order, and all of that stuff. But I knew that they were making videos. I just, because I was so entrenched in the doctrine and the order not to watch so-called anti-Christ videos. It all of these ex-member videos, it wasn't until this year when earlier this year when I started deconstructing that I started watching them. Yours, man, I started binge watching your stuff, man. I ain't even gonna
Yeah,
hold you.
definitely, definitely. Yo, I did it. I did it for brothers like yourself. There were so many people that meant so much to me. That they were like brothers, man. We were constantly around each other,
Mhm.
and I felt like I had to, the same way I felt like I had to teach everybody else that we're Israelites. Like it was like urgent. Um, you know, they make you think that the world is coming to an end soon. The doomsday doctrine and all of that. They've been teaching that since the 80s, that in the year 2000, Jesus Christ is going to come back. And then in that 2020, that's a more recent thing. They said 2020 was going to be the last Passover. or 2019 would be the last Passover. You got to get it exactly right for these guys, because if you miss, if you make a little mistake about the false prophecy that they made, they're gonna harp on that little stupid mistake and forget about that. We're actually talking about a whole false prophecy that your cult leader made.
Hold on, Mayan Stevenson, you said you got excommunicated for watching Antichrist videos. I mean, like, how did that happen, bro? You
Right.
got wow.
Let's do this right here, though. We're gonna watch some of these false prophecies that Tazadaki made. The seed and the deceiver are both his.
The deceived and the deceiver are both his. The deceiver and the deceiver are both his. What happened to the H1N1 is because so many different people knew about what the government was pulled back all the vaccines that they had made up. My prophecy was the vaccine, not the H1N1 virus that was going to do something, but the vaccine that was going to do something. The government didn't release the vaccine. We know that God lives outside of time, so when
he's talking about the H1N1 vaccine there. That was one of the first major false prophecies that Tazadakia spoke about. If you want to say that, oh well, the year 2000 false prophecy wasn't his idea, they're gonna try to take that away from him. But at the same time, they're gonna say that he received the Holy Spirit in 1999. Then by the year 2000, he should have been telling everybody, you know what? I know everything now, because that's what he said. Now he got the Spirit of God. He knows everything. He should have knew that in the year 2000, that Jesus Christ wasn't going to come back. But he made the mistake again and gave a date and tried to be more accurate about a certain prophecy, the 2020 prophecy.
Read it, therefore. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord. Read on. That it shall no more be said, the Lord liveth, that brought up the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt.
Everybody get that, right? That means something is going to supersede this, is going to overshadow it. Something else is going to happen that is going to be talked about, where this is not going to be talked about anymore. So it's going to be 1 year we have Passover, and the very next year we're going to be talking about this. That's what the Lord is telling us. That year is actually in 2020. Everybody understand that?
Come on, man. This was like an obvious scam at this point. I mean, this is the final straw. This should be the final straw for everybody. The false year 2020. This is the most recent thing that we could talk about, because he died on April 1st, 2020. So before he died, he made a prophecy that actually his death should already have been this confirmation of the whole thing. And then they were expecting him to resurrect from the dead within a few weeks after his death, pretty much, because he kept talking about April 17th.
Yeah, I remember people were posting that on Facebook, and I didn't even know what they were talking about. I know you know about that.
That's crazy that you as a member didn't even know what they were talking about, and you're still, in the cult. I'm on the outside looking in, and I'm like, I really don't know what the hell they're talking. I didn't see this video until years later, because I would have been posted this back in 2020. I didn't hear about this video right here. It's called "Thy people shall be willing in the day of thy power." You remember, that scripture, right?
Yeah.
He was trying to use that scripture to say that, well, yeah, we don't have that many members now, but once we get the power, a bunch of people are going to start coming in. That's what he was trying to say. And that they're going to go back to the land of Israel and fulfill a prophecy in Jeremiah chapter 16, verse 14 through 15, where it talks about the land of the north, which is actually talking about the land of Babylon, if you want to get down to it. but of course, they think America's Babylon, and you know. But you got anything you want to say? I see somebody commenting here, and you can answer any questions, address any of these questions and comments if you want, Willie.
Okay. Actually, I just want to continue with my story.
Yeah, man.
Um, right. So that whole debacle that happened earlier this year with me telling that apostle that I couldn't pay for the passport ID and the garment, and being told I still had to make a commitment. Okay, around this time I was starting to feel like really, really anxious. This stuff, this whole situation after over almost a year or over a year of verbal abuse, you know, everything that I was going through was affecting me mentally.
Mm,
And, it was getting towards the time of Passover, and I knew that if I told anybody that I wasn't gonna make it to Passover, I knew I was gonna get chewed out for it. And, you know, um hearing hearing this complete disregard for my situation um made me snap, and I started, my deconstruction process from that point. It's like, man, look,
right,
I mean, I told these dudes that I can't pay for this stuff. I know Passover's coming. I'm still in a situation where I'm under, I'm in a financial hardship still. I've had trouble trying to find work for a long time now, and I'm still expected to pay for all of this stuff. I've you know, taken
right,
verbal abuse from these higher ups in this place, over the past year, and now all of a sudden there's this complete disregard for my situation. And last year I was really sick. Just to mention something along those lines, around 2024 in March, I had gotten really sick. I had pains radiating from my stomach all the way to my back, and I didn't know what it was.
right.
Um, so I go to the ER and they tell me it's gallstones. And this was at the local ER here in Natchitoches. But I went the next morning to Shreveport, to a hospital in Shreveport. I get to the ER. I'm in excruciating pain, and I'm telling this chief priest over my area, about what's going on. And he's like, great, great, great. Hopefully they'll get you fixed up so you can come to Passover. All right. So I get to the ER. They run tests on me and tell me I have a small bowel obstruction, which is that's extremely serious. That's a medical crisis right there. That's a medical emergency, because with a bowel obstruction, if you don't get emergency surgery quickly, it could turn fatal because it could get infected and you could cause you to go into septic shock. So
Right.
they do the surgery and everything, and I'm laying up in the hospital bed. I got a nasal gastro tube going up my nose, sucking bile out of my stomach. um I'm laying in this uncomfortable hospital bed, and this guy, this chief priest from Allentown, is telling me that I need to send the bishop over my Sabbath attendance, um, a doctor's excuse, and paperwork of my diagnosis. Because
What the hell?
yes,
Come on, man.
and it's if because they celebrate the first day of Passover as a Sabbath, and if they don't get this information, these documents, this doctor excuse, and
Right.
the diagnosis of my small bowel obstruction, if they don't get that, it could be counted against me as a Sabbath violation, and I'd have to come to council. And I'm sitting up here having to deal with this while I'm laying up in this uncomfortable hospital bed after having emergency surgery for something that could have killed me. Um, so I'm stuck. I'm in the hospital for about 9 days. I can't eat nothing or drink nothing because I got this nasal gastro tube going up my nose, sucking bile out of my stomach. I can look and see the green bile going into a large container across from where I was laying. And I'm in the hospital for 9 days. I can't eat or drink anything at all. So I'm up in the hospital starving to death. I'm receiving round the clock care 24 hours, IVs being refilled, blood work, taken for x-rays, and uh all of this stuff, and then on top of that, the medicines that I'm usually prescribed, I can't even take them by mouth. I have to take what the hospital gives me, and the medicine was actually failing me. So I get out the hospital after 9 days. I'm still sick as a dog. I can't hold down no food. I'm throwing up, and I need a walker to get around or a cane to get around because I'm walking around here with a bloated stomach, can barely put one foot in front of the other. Fast forward to May of 2024, this chief priest from Allentown is contacting me about, after everything I've been going through, he's contacting me about coming to second Passover. I'm not fully healed and can't go nowhere.
Hmm.
All right, so it is not like he didn't know about my situation. I was telling him.
Right.
So he goes on this whole spiel about how the second Passover is for the people that missed the first Passover, as if I didn't know that after being in this place for 20 plus years.
Right.
You know.
They already should have known that you knew about that, and but they should never even brought that up because the things that you're dealing with is not something that's just gonna, just uh fix itself 1 month to the next.
Right. And so this guy goes on to say, I know people that went through some really serious stuff and they still made it. Well, hell, I doubt that anybody you knew that went through anything went through something that could have killed them if they didn't have emergency surgery in time. And I'm still not healed. I didn't even start feeling better until the week of second Passover,
Hmm.
you know. And I got threatened with counsel again from this guy, talking about if I didn't make it to second Passover, it would be a Sabbath violation. This is the kind of crap that I've had to deal with from these people. And I still had to get on the Sabbath conference calls while I was laying up in the bed after having surgery. I couldn't get away from getting on the Sabbath conference calls. I had to sit up there holding a phone up to my ear trying to listen to the Sabbath conference calls after I had emergency surgery for a small bowel obstruction when I should have had my ass sleep and resting.
Hmm.
But they making me get on the conference calls. I had somebody that was coming to do physical therapy, um and I when the guy came to do physical therapy, I had to tell this chief priest, it was minutes before one of those Sabbath classes on Saturday. I had to tell this chief priest, sir, I'm going to do physical therapy. The guy's coming to do physical therapy with me, and it's minutes before the Sabbath conference call is supposed to start. And I'm like, he's telling me to tell the guy I have a very important call that I have to be on. And this guy is doing physical therapy with me to help me get my strength back. And he's walking me all around the hospital.
Hmm.
And I got to sit up here and worry about getting back in that bed so I can get on a Sabbath conference call after I had some serious surgery and should have been asleep. It's just no compassion and no care.
That's horrible, man. That's a horrible situation. I work in the medical field, so I know how hard it is to get a physical therapist to even come out if you're not like 65 years old or something on Medicare, you know, like there's people that need home health, and it's a whole difficult process to even get somebody to help you out, and these people think that, I mean, they're delusional. They think that somehow you being in the ICGJC is supposed to have some type of healing power. Like they
Mhm,
talk about Job having this hedge around him, and before you even catch any sickness, you should already have a protection, they say. But
mhm,
once you get sick, the reason for sometimes people getting sick in the ICGJC is supposed to be for the purpose of you being healed. So
Mhm.
that way they could be known. I mean, this is what they think. They'll use scriptures to try to justify it, but they'll say that the only reason why you got sick was for God to heal you and for God's glory to be known. So that was an opportunity right there that was lost. You know, that the ICGJC, if they were really about that, this should have happened. This shouldn't have been a problem where they're trying to reach out to you. Why can't you come? That's ridiculous, man. They expect you to come out to, first of all, you missed the Passover because they knew your condition. How are you gonna? Why can't they find a way, to send their people out to you? They talk about the power of healing constantly. I remember this brother that has like fibromyalgia. He used to run the Philadelphia radio shows. Um,
Mhm.
you know, um, where's his healing? They try to make it seem like he was healed of whatever pain he had, but there were people in there that were permanently on wheelchair, that were never that never walked. You have Tazadaki's brother, Ahmath. He lost a few of his limbs. If you read the scriptures, there's stories where Christ made limbs grow back. That's something that's you never find in medical history. Nobody has ever lost a limb and then grew it back like a lizard with a tail or something. That doesn't happen, you know, in medicine. There's nothing that can do that. In biology, you lose a limb, it's gone. It doesn't grow back, you know. But you have the stories in the Bible that say that's supposed to happen. If the ICGJC was such a powerful place with this divine power from God, this healing power, it should have affected people like you, people like um, some of these brothers that you have stories like DJ Fat Kid's father who passed away, who they did a funeral for. You had you probably remember Thahawam.
Mhm. Yeah, I used to talk to Thawam a lot.
Yeah, Thahawam passed away. There was another brother from Philly. I keep forgetting the brother from Philly. Um, that made a whole video. The Injustice League made a whole video about him. You know, he had
Haradapia?
like, yeah, there you go, Haradapia. It was, yeah, there you go. People like that, man. Like, who else is supposed to get healed, if not these brothers? If not these brothers, man, who is supposed to get healed, and where's it happening at? You have some of the most diehard people in the ICDJC that there's an opportunity for them. They have bad health. There's an opportunity for them to get healed and for the
Mhm.
power and the glory of God to be shown. And it's not. It's a missed opportunity. I don't know, man. This is like all red flags to me, man.
Right. S so, continuing on with, my story, because 'cause I'm leading up to why, I what caused me to leave. Um, alright, so I'm deconstructing, at this point, watching ex-member videos, reading the writings of the early church fathers, people like Saint Ignatius of Antioch, Saint Athanasius, Saint Irenaeus, um, you know, Saint Justin Martyr. And for people who don't know, the early church fathers were either direct disciples of the apostles or people that were taught by the apostles. Uh, Ignatius of Antioch and Saint Polycarp were both direct disciples of the apostle John. Um, and and uh, and Ignatius of Antioch, in particular, he said things like, for example, that if anybody comes to you preaching Judaism, which back then in those days, Judaism meant Mosaic law keeping, that if anybody comes to you preaching Judaism, don't listen to them.
Right.
You know, and he also mentioned in one also mentioned that they didn't keep the Sabbath. The early church, eventually, you know, when you get to around the late first century, that Mosaic law keeping eventually phased out, you know, because they understood what the Apostle Paul said. Uh, Let no man therefore judge you in meat or in drink or in respect of an holy day or of the new moon or of Sabbath days, meaning nobody is supposed to judge you in regards to what you eat, meaning dietary laws. Nobody is supposed to judge you over whether or not you keep Passover, Pentecost, Purim, Hanukkah, Feast of Tabernacles, the Day of Atonement. Um, Nobody is supposed to judge you over whether or not you keep a Sabbath. Why? In verse 17, it says, which are a shadow of things to come. Those things in the law that Israel was keeping, the high holy days and the Sabbaths and the dietary laws, those things were all shadows that pointed to Jesus Christ. But the body is of Christ. What does that mean? Once Jesus Christ has come, he's the reality, he's the substance, he's the body. Once he has come, you don't go back to the shadows that pointed to him. So under the new covenant, a believer is not held to Old Testament high holy day keeping and dietary laws. Okay. So nobody has a right to judge you. You know, you miss a Sabbath and they'll have you in council for missing the Sabbath. Or let me bring it up to date. You don't get on a Sabbath conference call on time or don't stay on a Sabbath conference call the entire time. You have a bishop contact you through text telling you, unfortunately, sir, that's a Sabbath violation. Another bishop will contact you to see when you can come to council over a conference call, man.
Right.
And they're still doing conference calls on the Sabbath. But nobody is supposed to be able to judge a believer of Jesus Christ under the New Testament over whether or not they keep these things. Because Christ fulfilled those things with his death on the cross. He brought them to completion. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 17, where he said, think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I come not to destroy, but to fulfill. The word for fulfill in the Greek text of Matthew 5:17 is plerosai, which means to bring to completion. Jesus Christ, his death on the cross brought to completion all the ordinances that Israel was keeping, not just animal sacrifices, but the high holy days, the Sabbaths, the dietary laws, all of that stuff. He brought that to completion with his death on the cross. If you try to bring a new covenant believer under these things that Christ fulfilled with his sacrifice, these dietary laws, high holy days, and Sabbaths, okay, the early church called that Judaizing. And that is actually a form of heresy. Okay. Acts 15th chapter, they already settled this. The apostle said, now why therefore tempt you God to put a yoke on the neck of the disciples that neither we nor our fathers could bear? What does that mean? The Israelites, the forefathers of the Israelites, they didn't even keep this, and you want to sit up there and put newly converted believers under these things. And they told those newly converted believers who were Gentiles, actual Gentiles, not Israelites in a Gentile state of mind, not Israelites scattered amongst the nations. When you go into the Greek of Romans chapter 1, verse 16, when Paul says to the Jew first and also to the Greek, the word in Greek is Hellene, which means a non-Israelite, an actual Greek person, a Gentile, not a scattered Jew. Not a Hellenized Jew. The word for a Greek-speaking Jew in the Greek New Testament is Hellenistus. That word is not used in Galatians 3:28, for there is neither Jew nor Greek. That word is not used in Greek in Romans 10:12, for there is no difference between the Jew and the Greek. Okay, the word that's used in those scriptures is Hellene, which means an actual Greek person. That's what that's talking about. You can't put new covenant believers under Old Testament dietary laws, high holy days, and Sabbaths because Christ fulfilled those things with his death on the cross. The scriptures tell you in Romans chapter 10, verse 4, for Christ is the end of the law for righteousness to everyone that believeth, meaning Christ's death on the cross put an end to the law being what righteousness is. Okay? The scriptures tell you in the Old Testament, in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 24 and 25, that it shall be our righteousness that if we keep the commandments. That's in the Old Testament. But in Galatians chapter 2, verse 21, what does the Apostle Paul say? I do not frustrate the grace of Christ. For if righteousness come by the law, then Christ is dead in vain. Because Christ's death fulfilled all of those things that Israel was under. He brought them to completion. So you can't put new covenant believers under Old Testament high holy days and Sabbaths. Christ already fulfilled that. And if you try to do that, you are what the early church called a Judaizer. You're somebody that's trying to put somebody under things that Christ fulfilled with his blood, with his sacrifice, and that is wrong. That's heretical according to if you look up Judaizing, you'll find out that that's actually heresy to do that because Christ already fulfilled these things. How dare you put believers of Jesus Christ back under those things when Christ already shed his blood to fulfill those things and bring them to completion. Okay, the reason why ICGJC and all of these splinter groups claim to believe in Jesus Christ, but yes, they are keeping high holy days and Sabbaths and dietary laws is because Abba Bivens, the founder of One West, who was under Rabbi Wentworth Matthew and the Commandment Keepers,
Right.
okay, they kept high holy days and Sabbaths because Wentworth Matthew's congregation was an Old Testament only Black Hebrew Israelite group. Bivens split off from them in the early 1960s. And he started the original One West School in 1969 under the name the Israeli School of Tanakh. That's what it was called. It wasn't called ISUPK originally. It was the Israeli School of Tanakh.
That's right. That's right.
After he died in 1973, it was called ISUPK, Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge. That was after he died, and Yaquab and Masha took over the school.
Right.
And then from 1974 until sometime in the 1980s, the name got changed again to Israeli Church of Universal Practical Knowledge. And then from the 1980s all the way into 2001, that's when it got changed to Israelite Church of God, AND, and Jesus Christ. But the reason why these Hebrew Israelite groups claim to believe in Christ, but yet they keep high holy days and Sabbaths, that's because when Abba Bivens broke off from the Commandment Keepers, which was an Old Testament only Hebrew Israelite group that observed these laws, he believed in Christ, but he kept the observance of high holy days and Sabbaths. The early Christian church, after the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, and after the apostles went out and started teaching and gathering Gentiles from among the nations, Christ said, go therefore and make disciples of all nations.
Right.
The church, through the efforts of the apostles, became more and more increasingly Gentile as time went on. So there was, and the Jerusalem Council in Acts 15 chapter already settled this debate. Newly converted believers were not to be put back under these Old Testament high holy days and Sabbaths. All right. But ICGJC, they claim to believe in Christ, but they still keep these ordinances that Christ fulfilled with his blood.
When you heard in the ICGJC that Jesus Christ is Yahweh. Was that the first time you heard that?
Yeah, because originally the guy that taught me, what he taught me was that he taught me the old salute, Yahweh Ba'Shem, Yahweh Shabbarak. He taught me
Okay.
that God the Father was Yahweh and Christ was Yahweh Shai. And I didn't notice until I got on the Holy Conception Unit website that it was changed to God the Father being Abba Nawa and Jesus Christ being Yahweh. That's when I first saw it.
When I came in '04, there was never any mention of Yahweh Shai. I never heard that shit until it just came up, I guess, when I was speaking to a so-called rebel, my cousin, who was in the ISUPK and the ICUPK. So I have
Mhm.
family that was in this whole cult when it was just getting started, with the 12 tribe sign in the early '90s in New York City. And they were attracting Dominicans, making them think that they're black. That you
Mhm.
talk about the erasure of blackness. We were like you can see this is a clear thing even in society outside of the ICGJC. They call Barack Obama the first black president, and they'll call him black, but they'll never call him white. Isn't
Mhm.
that funny? Like how his mother's white, and you never hear any mention of Barack Obama being called a white man at all.
No.
He's a black man.
Mhm.
This is a very like racist thing. This comes from something called the one drop rule, pretty much.
Mhm.
This is where I think it comes from, where African Americans were taught to think that if you have just the slightest bit of black in you, you're black. Of course, we know the ICGJC teaches the father's doctrine, the father's seed doctrine. So they twist it a little bit, but it's still very similar to that one drop rule. And you have Hispanics that were whiter than me. You have white people that are running camps in GMS in Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah, I saw
And
that, man. That's
these are
crazy.
people. These are people that are straight white. Like they have no. They're not even Italian or Hispanic or none of that. They're just white, and they fall for the doctrine. And they allowed these people to come in there, and some of them, were, even move up to be the leader in the city. Um, it's insane what's going on because you always hear about the racism that's coming up against black people, but we were in a cult where we were getting tricked by our own people, by black people,
Mhm.
and that's the a common like um a common thing that's being like pushed, that I see, that people think that anything white is just wrong, and anything that comes from blackness or the roots, like this is the essence, this is where life and humanity springs from. um you see that happening right in front of our faces, but we're trained to think that the racism is coming from the other side, when you can see some of these people are getting down on their knees and licking the boots of black Hebrew Israelites. They like to tell you that that's a prophecy, but what I see that's happening is that they're using shame and guilt, which is common amongst cults, to use to separate people. This is identity. This is part of identity cult thing.
Mhm.
They know how to shame people, where you don't even have to do, in as an individual, you don't have to perform a sin. You don't have to commit a sin. You can be tied to a sin by affiliation just because you're white, and now they do something called group guilt. It's called group guilt, or you might hear the term collective guilt, where they're taking away your individualism, and now they're wrapping you up in a group, and making you guilty by association, you know?
Mhm.
And it's a powerful tool that, you know, any person that has any type of empathy might fall for that because they just feel bad already because you're connecting them with somebody else. You're aligning them. Like they're you might be a Trump supporter, right? And Trump might say something stupid as hell, and you might feel the need to defend him, even though you know that he was dead wrong about what he said. You know, we did that with Tazadakia, you know, and this is what happens when you become a part of a group that you identify with because of whatever race or, you know, but the ICGJC, man, is very similar. Like this is a movement that became popular way before the internet and YouTube. But YouTube and the internet helped definitely push things, you know, some of these teachings. Um, I know you were on the internet a lot. Do you remember um, a website, the 12 tribes of Israel.com?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. That's IUIC before they became known as IUIC. I actually ran across them when I was searching for stuff back in like '03. So I did see Nathaniel and his crew back then. And I watched
Yeah,
some of that stuff, you know. And this was before I even joined ICGJC. I ran across that.
right, right. Yeah, we ran across a lot of these cats with the IUIC back in like the early 2000s, and they weren't as organized as we were at all. It wasn't until after like 2012 you started seeing the IUIC coming up more.
Mhm.
Um, what do you think about the Hebrew Israelite movement right now, man? You know, because there's like I mentioned earlier, there's people that leave the ICGJC because they don't believe in Tazadakia. So that's a obvious, that was obvious. Leaving the ICGJC, that's something that's obviously wrong. But what was it about the Hebrew Israelite doctrine to you that was like, did you come to the conclusion that you were not a Hebrew Israelite, like, you know, after Tazadakia, because I'm trying to like kind of pinpoint how you left the ICGJC, and it seems like this was after Tazadakia was already dead.
Yeah, it is.
So
Yeah.
so I want to get more into the doctrines, pretty much, you know,
Mhm.
and where how that led you to, you know, deprogramming from the identity, because I think that's a very powerful tool. Is the fact that you can identify with a group of people based on race, and
Mhm.
that somehow means something to God. You know, talk
Well,
about that transition out.
all right. So, like I said, I was studying the writings of the early church fathers. That was a major thing because I was starting to see that the early church fathers in the post apostolic history of the early church was just after the original 12 apostles. You know, the church was, like I said, they weren't observing high holy days and Sabbaths and feast days and all of that and dietary laws. That's one thing that made me think, if I'm seeing that the early church after all of the apostles had died, if they weren't keeping these things, then why was I still doing it? Also, studying the Greek and the Hebrew, because when you actually go into the original languages and you start looking at these words, the Hebrew and Greek equivalent of words in the English, that's when you really start seeing things that you were never taught in these Hebrew Israelite camps. um, and you really start to see how verses get twisted far beyond the original context of what the original languages are actually saying. We touched on that a little bit about John 3:16. Um, with the word world, cosmon, meaning the entire created order, the entire human race. And then you have a scripture like Isaiah 45:17, which says in the KJV, it says world without end, but in the Hebrew, it literally means uh, until the ages of the ages, ad olme ad in the Hebrew, you know. Um,
Yeah.
so and just studying the original languages, studying the church fathers, and eventually that led me to studying um the Orthodox Church, because ICGJC, they claim to have an apostolic succession, but the thing is that when you actually go into church history, you have the apostles that Christ chose. The
Right.
successors of the apostles that Christ chose were the bishops of the early church. It wasn't another line of apostles under them. It was the bishops of the early church, the men that they laid hands on and made bishops. That's who took on the leadership of the early church after the apostles that Christ chose. And it was a continuous line of bishops. Okay. Now the
Right.
thing is though, um, if you can't prove that you have an unbroken episcopal line going back 2,000 years to the early church fathers and early church bishops, and from them to the apostles, you don't have any apostolic succession. Okay.
Right.
What they call the apostolic succession in ICGJC didn't even exist until the early 2000s, after years of them calling themselves chief high priests.
Hmm.
Okay. They were calling themselves chief high priests, and then in the early 2000s, that's when they made up their quote unquote order of 12 holy apostles and started calling it the apostolic succession. Succession of who? Who is it in the early church that you can trace your lineage back to say that you're successors of the apostles? You can't. You're a Black Hebrew Israelite group that didn't even exist until 1969, first of all. And the fact that you're a Black Hebrew Israelite group automatically uh, disqualifies you from any apostolic succession. Oh, thank you. On 2001. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's that. And also with studying orthodoxy, I started learning about the worship practices of the Orthodox Church, like the divine liturgy. You know, the divine liturgy is the prayers that were written by early Christian saints like Saint Basil the Great, Saint John Chrysostom, and this is something that's incorporated in the Orthodox Church to this day. And
Mm.
it's all about. There's a lot of emphasis on um, singing the divine liturgy, because the idea is that you're connecting with God when you're actually in the divine liturgy service, and then you have the partaking of the Eucharist after the service. The Eucharist was not something that the Roman Catholics invented. This is something. The original Eucharist was the Lord's Supper. And remember, we were taught that was something that was supposed to be done every year at Passover, right? Because
Mm.
they had the ceremony of Passover, which they would have us eating the unleavened bread and drinking the wine. The thing is, though,
Right.
when you go into Matthew 26 chapter, the Lord instituted the Lord's Supper while they were already eating the Old Testament Passover meal. Okay. They were already eating the Old Testament Passover meal of the unleavened bread and the bitter herbs and the lamb at that last supper before Christ's crucifixion. And while they were eating, like it tells you in Matthew 26, that's when the Lord took bread and broke it and said, eat, this is my body.
Right.
And then he took the wine And he said, take this is the blood of the new covenant that was shed for you, to paraphrase scripture. This was being newly implemented while they were already eating the Old Testament Passover meal. Then when you read in First Corinthians, Paul said that he received of the Lord what he delivered to the church, how the Lord took bread and said, take, eat, this is my body. He took the wine after supper, after they had supped, and said, this is the blood of the New Testament that was shed for you. Drink ye all of it. And he said, as often as you drink, as you eat of this bread and drink of the wine, as often. Often, the word often means more than once. Okay, if you're doing something often, you're doing it more than once.
Right.
And in Acts, the book of Acts, after 3,000 souls on the day of Pentecost, which is after Passover, what do? In verse 42 of Acts 2nd chapter, it tells you that they continued in the apostles' doctrine and breaking of bread. So that means the breaking of the bread was a part of the apostles' doctrine that they taught the church. Where did the apostles get the breaking of the bread from? They got it from Christ, who told them, who broke bread and told them, take, eat, this is my body. That's letting you know that they were partaking in the Lord's Supper. That's what the breaking of the bread is. And even in the Greek text, it says kalasai tonorton, which means the breaking of the bread. It's not just any bread that's being broken. This is the bread that Christ told them to break and eat in remembrance of his body. And they went, and in verse 26 of Acts 2nd chapter, it tells you that they went from house to house breaking bread. So already you see that not only did they break bread in the remembrance of Christ's body, and they did that, just as Christ commanded, they did it on the day of Pentecost, which is after Passover, and they did it more often than just once a year at Passover, because they were going from house to house breaking bread. And in Acts 20:7, it tells you what? On the first day of the week, when the apostles were gathered together to break bread, first day of the week is Sunday.
Right.
Okay. When you read the writings of the early church fathers like Justin Martyr, he tells you himself, and he was from the 2nd century early church period. And he was a Christian apologist that debated Jews of the circumcision.
Right.
He tells you in his first apology that it was on the first day of the week that everybody gathered together. And what were they brought? They were brought bread and wine and water. What was this? They were commemorating the Lord's Supper. And why did they have the wine and the water? They had the wine and the water. They took the water and mixed it with the wine together to represent how it tells you in the scriptures that out of Christ's side, when he was pierced, came forth. Let me get it. John chapter 19.
It says water.
Let me see. In the book of John, and blood. Let me see. Let me see.
When they pierced his side.
Yeah, when they pierced his side. I was trying to find the exact scripture.
Mm-hmm. Let's go. All this is important to expose, like, I mean, really, it's just to show what's true.
Mm-hmm.
Because whenever you show what's true, it's gonna expose what's not true. It's gonna naturally expose the lies. We got the Manischewitz. I'm still drinking the Manischewitz, by the way. I never changed. Shout out to everybody in the chat right now. And if you say something weird, I'm gonna remove you for 24 hours from
Okay,
the
so
live stream. But
John,
yeah,
John,
man, let Napash him off. Go ahead, brother.
John 19:34, but one of the soldiers with a spear pierced his side, and forthwith there came out blood and water. So when the early church commemorated the Lord's Supper, they had the bread, they had water, and they had wine, and they mixed the wine and the water to represent the blood and water that came out of Christ's side when he was pierced. But the point is that they did it more often than just once a year at Passover. We were led to believe that that was only supposed to be done once a year at Passover, and it was because of the fact that they would read in the scriptures about the Last Supper before his crucifixion, and read about the institution of the Lord's Supper during that time, and think that because it was instituted during that last supper that last Passover before his crucifixion, that it was to be done once a year at Passover. No, they did it more often than that. And you even have, like I said, Justin Martyr, he went into how they did it. They gathered together on Sunday and they had bread, wine, and water. That's how they did it.
Wow. When was that started? When was that implemented? What year?
Well, the the they care, you have to consider the fact that everything that was there were apostolic traditions that were passed down from the apostles to the early church. So to answer your question, it would go back to the apostles because the early church carried on in the apostolic tradition of the apostles. Everything that the apostles taught the bishops that succeeded them is what the bishops taught to the rest of the congregation, and it was continuously passed on down.
Right.
So they were they that's what they were doing. Um,
What do you think about these Hebrew Israelites in the ICGJC? All these rappers that are using the names of these saints, like Saint Justinian and Saint Basil. Like they try to use these names, but obviously these Orthodox Christians have nothing to do with what these cats are teaching nowadays. Like I think you're pointing out an obvious, contrast
mhm.
within what these people believed and compared to what these Hebrew Israelites believed.
The irony about that is, okay, first of all, it was taught that the Byzantine Empire was a Israelite Christian empire, so to speak. Listen,
Right.
the early church became increasingly more and more Gentile as time went on. Okay. Saint Basil the Great, the historical Saint Basil the Great was not black. He wasn't Russian. He was a Cappadocian Greek. Him, his brother Saint Gregory, and their sister Saint Macrina the Younger, they were
Mm.
from a Cappadocian Greek family. They wasn't black. They wasn't Israelites. They were Gentiles. They were Cappadocian Greeks.
What do you consider black? Is it like sub-Saharan African? Because that's how I look at it now. I'm like, what people consider black, I think like you don't even see that in North Egypt
Mhm,
in some occasions. Like yeah, if you go back far enough, they were like Nubians that were in Egypt, but if you actually look at during the time of the Israelites, the Egyptians looked very much like the Israelites,
mhm,
and even their language, well, not the Egyptians, but if you look at the Canaanite language, definitely very similar to the Israelites. But all of these languages are considered Afro-Asiatic,
mhm,
and it's not ethnic. These are language groups, which has nothing to do with people groups, but still, you can find a connection and see a connection between Egyptians and Middle Eastern people, and people that were in Egypt, especially after like 1200 BC, they didn't look like some of the people that were in sub-Saharan Africa at that time that were speaking languages that are similar to the Congolese and Bantu languages.
Mhm.
That's a whole different world that I don't think the Bible even speaks about. There's limitations in the Bible. The Bible, even in the dietary law is not going to speak about kangaroos and wallabies and penguins and polar bears because those animals weren't around in the Levant. Then they still aren't. Like they would have had like little or no knowledge to some of these animals. And I think that even when they speak about Shem, Ham, and Japheth, like these aren't these three different people groups. Like they try to make it seem they're Negroid, Caucasoid, and Mongoloid. That's how they try to separate it. Back if you go back far enough.
Mhm.
If you look into what the Hamites look like, um, I don't even think they look like what people try to talk about Israelites look like. I think that they all had similar kind of genetic background. The Canaanites and the you know Shemitic people, the Israelites, pretty much. Um, but that's a whole nother story that I don't think the ICGJC is even ready for. That's something that you learn when you like deprogram from the ICGJC. You start learning about actual alphabets and how you can connect certain people through the alphabet. Um, but I guess let's read some of these comments real quick before we continue on because I know I've been missing out. Um, yeah, I'm sorry. There's probably like ICGJC members that's in the chat trying to disrupt things. I don't know what's going on, but I mean, I do have people that come on from different live streams that I've done. So who knows what's going on? But I think we spoke about a little bit about like the money schemes that were going on in the ICGJC, man. Were you around when Tazadaki was uh, promoting that? I don't think he ever promoted it, but it came out that he was getting sued or he was suing a doll maker for making a doll that wasn't dark enough, and then he was gonna sell it to these people
Yeah, I
uh,
remember that.
during the Passover, right?
Mhm.
I don't know if that was such a big deal to you, but to me that was like a really big deal because it took somebody from GMS to teach me about that, to actually like expose that. I was a believer in this shit for years, man, and just because I was out didn't mean nothing. I kept in contact with people that were still in there, and nobody had the courage to tell me that Tazadaki was suing some company that was supposed to make a doll, that was gonna say certain things, you know, this this the toy maker I actually did an interview with the toy maker. Um I forget his name, something Vical. Um he made a doll originally of Sarah Palin when she was the vice president for John McCain. They were running against Barack Obama. She made a doll or he made a doll of Sarah Palin, and the doll spoke, and that's what they were gonna do. They were gonna make a doll, Tazadake doll, and he was gonna say like praise Yahweh. He was gonna say like common things that was being said in the cult.
Mhm.
But before it even got to that, um, they were trying to sue the toy maker because they say it wasn't black enough. They were trying to use race, and that's a common thing that these cats do is they use the identity, they use race or racism, and they were trying to sue the doll maker because supposedly he didn't make him black enough. The doll maker who I interviewed told me that the image that they sent was like a bright image. It was like a white undertone, a shiny undertone. So he tried to make it look like that. They were complaining that the nose didn't look right. Like this is all subjective. The doll maker said that they never had any intent to pay him in the first place. This was all a scam for them to sue him using dirty money. They used dirty money to pay him for the dolls, right? Because it all came from us,
Mhm.
and none of that shit can be traced back now. And so when you sue somebody and the judge makes a determination that the doll maker has to, pay the restitution, now you get all that money back and then some, and it gets cleaned through the system.
Mhm.
And he thought that he did that. The only thing is that the judge realized that this was a scam, and he only got the money back that he paid. So he didn't really win. All he did was get the money back that he paid, and the scam failed, because in everybody's eyes, even the judge, this was obviously a scam that didn't work.
Mhm.
You know, I look at that and I'm like, you know, the court records show that he was going to charge 3 times the amount that he paid for each doll. He was going to charge $120. He paid $40 a doll, and that money was, I mean, that was supposedly the intention. We never there's even Rebel Alliance Media, KOC, called the church one time and was like, "Yo, I want to buy one of Chazadaki dolls." Eh, Shout out to him, man. That's a funny ass fucking video, man. But yeah, man, I don't know, man. There were things like that that were coming up, and I remember I called somebody about that, and I was like, "Yo, is this true? Did Tazadaki really make a doll and was trying to sell it, and there's a loss?" Cause like I don't want to believe what I'm reading, and I got damn questioned left and right by my cousin's husband, Manatazak, because he wanted to know why I'm even asking about that. Like I was just trying to get answers about that, and I'm asking brothers that was in the cult, like, is this true? And then they were like, "Oh shit, let me report you to Manatazak." Like crazy stuff, bro. Like this is not like liberty, freedom. This is exactly how a cult operates. You call somebody to ask them about a story that you heard that's
Mhm.
controversial. And now you're getting reported to somebody, that's going to question you on why are you even asking about this story? Like as if they're not supposed to disclose this information to us.
Right.
Like there were things like that has nothing to do with biblical scriptures that to me is even sometimes more powerful than biblical scriptures itself, and how we can show how these people are wrong through the doctrine. Shout
Mhm.
out to Jerome Hudson with the rebel with the injustice.
Injustice League. Yeah, I've seen their videos also.
Yeah, because what they
Mhm.
were doing, they made a point, and of destroying the Taza doctrine. They wanted to push that it ain't about we're just mad. It's not like we're upset that no, there's actually, doctrinal issues, man, that we can go into and expose these cats all day long, man. What else can you think of, as far as the doctrine that really exposes these cats? Because there's a lot.
Hmm.
I don't know.
Um,
Do you think Jesus Christ was created, or because in the ICGJC they teach that Jesus Christ was created.
okay, let me address that. Let me address that. Okay.
That's a good topic. Yeah.
All right. Um, one of the things that I actually found out when I was deconstructing from this doctrine is that um this doctrine that we were taught about Jesus Christ being created, I would hear people say stuff like God the Father created Jesus Christ, and then Jesus Christ, after he was created by God the Father, um, Jesus Christ created everything else. That is actually a heresy called Arianism. Okay, there was a guy named Arius who was a heretic. He was a part of the early church, but he started teaching this same doctrine that Jesus Christ was a created being. Here's the problem with that. If you're saying that Jesus Christ was created by God the Father, then you're pretty much saying that before he was created by God the Father, he didn't exist, which is blasphemous. The scriptures tell you in the book of John, first chapter, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, meaning Jesus Christ, who is the Word, was with God the Father, and the Word was God. God the Father is the Ancient of Days. He's always been here. So if Jesus Christ was in the beginning with God the Father, and God the Father's always been here, that means Jesus Christ has always been here. He is eternal and uncreated. Okay, he was not a created being. He is created of the essence of God the Father. Okay, and even in the Nicene Creed, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. Christ is from the essence of God the Father.
Right.
Um, in the Nicene Creed of the early church, it tells you that Jesus Christ is begotten, not made. Um,
Right.
he's not made, he's uncreated, he's eternal. He's not a created being. That doctrine.
He comes forth from the Father,
Mhm,
like sunlight comes forth from the sun.
mhm,
You know. So as long as the sun has existed, sunlight has been coming forth from the sun, and both of them kind of coexist. Even though one comes from the other, they both coexist.
mhm.
And that's how I think it's talking about the Father and the Son. It produces the sun produces light, kind of like how it like the sun comes and is produced of the Father. That doesn't mean that there was a beginning. I never that because I never understood that when it came to being in the ICDJC.
Mhm.
They taught us that there was a beginning to Jesus Christ, because John 3:16 says the only begotten. So when you think of begotten, it means created or but it all goes back to this kind of a oneness where one comes out of the other, and there is no beginning of either,
Okay.
because it all kind of coexists together,
All right.
just like sunlight comes from the sun.
Okay. Let me just address. Um, like I was saying, that doctrine, that Jesus Christ was a created being. That's heretical. Like I said, you can look up Arianism. It's spelled Arianism, Arianism, and it was started by a heretic named
Ar-
Arius.
Arius, yeah,
And
I remember
now
that.
the word for only begotten, like in John 3:16, is pronounced monogeny, and it means one of a kind, unique. But now, like I said, the scriptures tell you in 1 Timothy 1:17, now unto the King eternal,
Right.
referring to Christ. Okay. Christ is the eternal King. Let me get that real quick since I quoted it.
Definitely.
Okay, 1 Timothy 1:17, now unto the King eternal, referring to Jesus Christ. He's the eternal King. If he's eternal, that means that he's always been here. And if he's always been here, he wasn't created. He is from the essence of God the Father. He was not created. He's God the Father is the Ancient of Days. He's always been here. And Jesus Christ was in the beginning with God the Father. That means Christ has always been here. He's eternal and uncreated. That
Right.
doctrine that we were taught about him being a created being is a heresy. It's called Arianism.
Right.
All right, so um let's see. Let me think of something else. Another doctrine that right now I want to go into where they taught us that Jesus Christ only died for the Israelites. Now, it is true that Christ told the apostles to only go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel in Matthew 10:5 and 6. And that Christ out of his own mouth said, I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. But we were taught that this proved that Christ only died for the Israelites. But the scriptures tell you that in Luke chapter 24, Luke 24, in Luke, the 24th chapter, in verse 46, it says, and said unto them, thus it is written, and thus it behooved Christ to suffer and to rise from the dead the third day. Verse 47, and that repentance and remissions of sins should be preached in his name among all nations, beginning at Jerusalem. So the ministry started with Jerusalem first. Okay. He told them to only go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. He said he was only sent to the Israelites. The ministry started in Jerusalem first, then to the nations, the Gentiles after that, because after Christ died and was resurrected and was seen after his resurrection, what he told the apostles in Matthew chapter 28, verses 19 and 20 was, go ye therefore and teach all nations, which means exactly what it says. Okay, you can't twist this to say that that means to only go to Israelites and all nations. Okay, because in the Greek of Matthew 28:19, where it says, go ye therefore and teach all nations. Let me get the Greek text next. Matthew 28 in the Greek.
Hmm.
Matthew 28th chapter, verse 19 in the Greek. Porotentes on metetosante panta ta ethne. Now, what this means is porotentes, which means uh, go therefore, go, mean having gone forth, un therefore, metetosante means make disciples of, panta, all, ta, the, ethne, nations. The word ethne means nations, Gentiles, non-Israelites. So in the Greek text of Matthew 28:19, where it says, go ye therefore and teach all nations, the word for nations is ethne, which means Gentiles, non-Israelites. It doesn't mean only Israelites in all nations. So that scripture gets twisted, by these Hebrew Israelites.
Right.
So
They
the
use Romans chapter 9 also. That we could go into that later.
Mhm.
They like to say that Paul called himself a Gentile. I forget what scripture says that Paul called himself a Jew of Tarsus.
Mhm.
But if you read Romans chapter 9, I think verse 25 or 24, it says that even us whom
Whom
God
he
has,
have called,
right, not only of the Jews,
but
but
also
of the
of,
Gentiles.
yeah.
So they say that Paul is calling himself a Gentile by saying even us. So he's including himself with us.
Hmm.
But you can I mean, I don't know. Like if we go into the Greek, maybe we could understand it better. But
I'll go there.
yeah, I've always read that scripture and said Paul is including himself as a Gentile and saying even us, not only of the Jews, but of the Gentiles, us. And I'm like, well, who's speaking here? It seems like it's Paul, and he's including himself with the Gentiles. And then he refers back to Hosea, where it says that God shall call a people that were not his people. He should call his people. Obviously, that's talking about the Gentiles. Who are the people that were not called his people, but the Gentiles? But when it says even us, that's what people like to use that and say Paul is considering himself a Gentile here. You know, that contradicts the verse where he calls himself a Jew of Tarsus. Because if it says even us,
Hmm.
not only of the Jews, but also of the Gentiles, is he not a Jew? Did he never, Paul called himself a Jew? So, there's things that I haven't gone into that I think that you might know better than me.
Hmm.
And we could read that in the Greek and bring some clarification right there.
All right.
Yeah.
Um.
It says Romans chapter 9.
All right. So let's see here. Hold on 1 second.
That's fine. Romans chapter 9 was one of the first like chapters I learned where it's kind of a breakdown of the scriptures, from a certain narrative from the Hebrew Israelite narrative, that no matter what they did, they were always already chosen. So it's like it almost seems like it's not based off works. It's all based off God's decision, but not of works, right? It says not of works. He didn't choose Ishmael. He didn't choose Esau. He chose Isaac and he chose Jacob because that's what he wanted to do. That was his will. Esau was the breadwinner. Esau came out and brought back the livestock, the pot, the meat, and the potatoes, and his birthright was taken away.
Okay, I got Romans 9:24 in the Greek.
Yeah.
I'll read it through in the Greek first, then I'll break it down. Os kai ekalisin hemas, unomon ex iodaios, alakai ex ethnon. Okay, so us means whom. Kai in this instance means also. Ekalasin means he called. Hamas means us. U not. No one only. X of Eodios Jews. Allah but Kai also. X of ethnon. Okay, that last word, that's the word for Gentiles in that verse, ethnon. It means non-Israelite. It means Gentiles.
Right, right. So he called non-Israelites. Paul was an Israelite. He admitted it.
Mm-hmm.
He would be considered a Jew, man. Yeah, that's what you need to do is just actually go back to the original scripts, and we can't rely on this British English that was translated by King James and his translators as if it's the word of God. I mean, it's gonna do us justice to actually go into the original scripts, man. I've been pushing that for the longest because it debunks these guys. It debunks everything that they be trying to say once you go
Right.
into the actual original languages.
Right. Now I wanted to say something about that.
Yeah.
Okay. Now the King James Version, first of all, a lot of people, they always talk about modern English Bibles being revisions, in which when you actually uh, study where the source material for a lot of these modern Bibles come from, they actually come from older manuscripts. But in the case of the King James Version itself is King James 1611 edition is actually a revision of the 1602 Bishop's Bible, which was the Church of England's Bible that they were using prior to the King James being translated into English. They were using the Bishop's Bible. The source material for the King James Version Bible in translation was the Hebrew Masoretic text for the Old Testament, the Greek Textus Receptus for the New Testament, and the Latin Vulgate for the Apocrypha. All right. Now, when you get into the Greek text that was used for the translation of the King James New Testament, the Textus Receptus was not anywhere close to being the original Greek New Testament text. These were 12th to 15th century Byzantine era Greek texts. Compare and contrast that with modern English Bibles like the Christian Standard Bible, the ESV, the English Standard Version, the New American Standard Bible.
Right.
Those use much older manuscripts that were discovered centuries after the King James Version was published. They use for the Old Testament texts like the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Greek Septuagint, which was translated from Hebrew to Greek during the Greek Empire when 70 Jews went into the library of Ptolemy, who was ruling Egypt during that time. They went into his library and took the Hebrew scrolls and translated them into Greek. And this Greek translation was translated from much older Hebrew texts than the Masoretic text that the King James Version uses.
Hmm.
And for the New Testament, most modern Bibles use what this right here.
It's not the Texas Recepticus.
No, this right here, this is the Novum Testamum Grace. This is what most modern Bibles use.
Right.
And
And
this is
the King James verse, the King James used for the New Testament the Texas Recepticus, and then for the Book of Revelation it used the Latin Vulgate.
this is the Textus Receptus right here.
There you go. Yeah, this is what we have to do when we start trying to pinpoint what we're speaking about, man. If we want to be honest of what the interpretations say, we have to go into the original translations and not rely on these other translations to spoon feed us without us actually doing the work ourselves, man.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, I have to call it a night though, man. I mean, I want to give it at least 5 more minutes if you want to close it out with any closing statements. You know, I have really have not much more to say outside of closing this out. I want to continue this. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you can always come back on. You already know. Like Gerari's is a continuous guest. You could do the same thing. You could come on anytime you want, man. But
Mm-hmm.
let's kind of just close it out, man. If you want to just give any last words to people in the ICGJC or to people in the chat, you know, whatever you want to say before we get out of here, man. You know, what's
Um, Basically, I want to echo the same sentiments that I closed out the discussion that I had with Faithful to God. Shout out to Faithful to God if you know, check out his stuff if you haven't. Um, Basically, man, if you have people that are family members that are in these Hebrew Israelite cults, because that's what this is that we went to. This you have to come to reality and come to grips with it. This is a cult, okay? All of these Hebrew Israelite groups that teach one West Hebrew Israelism, they're all cults. Doesn't matter what letters make up the name. If
Mhm.
you have family members in any of these groups, pray for them and don't stop praying for them, okay? And I'm a witness of the fact that I was fully entrenched in this doctrine for over 2 decades of my life, and I got to the point where I was hard-headed and nobody can tell me anything. And that's the case when you become a complete fanatic for this doctrine. You get to the point where nobody can tell you nothing. When people get like that, the only thing you can do is pray for them and don't stop praying for them. You can't change these people. You know, you have to continue keeping them lifted up in prayer. And I thank God that He gave me the strength to finally get out of this stuff
Mhm.
because I was pretty much wasting decades of my life sitting there isolated way out here in Louisiana where there was never a branch of ICGJC and still not. And when I finally got into the ranking system, I endured some pretty bad verbal abuse that led me to deconstruct that doctrine and eventually leave after being a part of this for 20 plus years. And you might feel like, you know, the sunk cost fallacy might sink in. I invested 20 years in this. If I leave, I might not have anything to fall back on. Listen, one West Hebrew Israelism is heretical. This is a doctrine that will lead you straight into the lake of fire. It's not worth staying in this. All right. This Black Hebrew Israelite movement has been a cult the whole time. These people don't teach the Orthodox Christian doctrine that the apostles passed down to the early Christians and on down. The early church fathers never taught that John 3:16 meant Israel only. The early church fathers never taught that Jesus Christ only died for one nation of people. They taught that he died for all nations. The early church fathers never discriminated against Gentiles and taught that Gentiles would go to hell because the apostles were going out bringing in Gentiles into the church. And the church became increasingly more and more Gentile as time went on. It became more and more Gentile. You can't sit up here and continue to believe this stuff. This stuff is heretical. There's a lot of stuff that's being all of it is heresy. All right. You got to come out of that. And if you have family members in these camps, continue to pray for them and don't stop. That's it.
That's a great message. I try to not be so superstitious about these things, but this stuff was like literal witchcraft, man. The what it did to our minds. Um, and we all can corroborate it. That's why I love having these conversations, because I know that I'm not the only one that went through this. I know that I'm not the only one that saw this. We all saw these things, and we all um, can speak about it now, and I'm happy that you're out, brother. I rejoiced when I heard, that you were out. I was happy about that, because we had a little conversation about you on my channel just before you left. So it's perfect timing. There's so much more to talk about. We always used to have these conversations in the past where we'd be on the phone for hours talking about how much we love the scriptures, and going back and forth about the Bible, and we still have that relationship today, you know, after all um this nonsense that we went through. It's still it won't destroy a real believer. And I know that there's a lot of these Christians out here that they want to speak to you, man, because you are a perfect story, the good example of somebody that found the truth, in a lie.
Mhm.
But we're still here, man. We're gonna still keep doing more videos on San Miguel TV. Napash, man, what's your Hebrew name in there? Mr. Willie, Valerie Jr. I appreciate you coming through and telling your story. It's not easy
Mhm.
to do it, but you did it beautifully, man, with no strain. And I'm sure everybody that listen can see how genuine you are, and that there's other people that's going to be able to relate to you, and they're going to see this later on, and they're going to realize that the ICGJC are losing good brothers. They're losing very good people that were there. We were there trying to do our best, and as naive as we were, we wanted to serve God the right way, and we thought that we were doing it while we were in there. And it was a little hiccup in the road, a little speed bump. Um, it doesn't define who we are. It actually strengthens who we are today. And here we are telling our story. Thank you very much for doing that. Not everybody comes on my channel after they leave the ICGJC and tells their story. So it's good that we could have this.
Mhm.
Thank you, brother. We'll come back on another time, man. I'll have you on in a future live stream.
Mhm.
We have a lot of ideas that we bounce back and forth that we didn't even bring up. We didn't even get to everything on this live stream, but it was enough, and I appreciate you, man. Thank you very much. Um, let me see if anybody got some closing statements or closing comments. I'll just say I appreciate you. Wet, my sister. You know who you are. Mayan Stevenson, mad love to you. Brooklyn Outlaw, I gotta hit you up. I know you hit me up, Brooklyn Outlaw, man. I gotta hit you back. And everybody else that came on, Reno James, need to be free. Saint Ivan, thank you for coming through.
Mhm.
And we'll be back again, man. Peace out.
All right.
Have a good night. And see you on the next one, man.
All right. Thank you for having me, Miguel.
Yes, sir. Talk to you soon, man.
All right.
All right. Peace.